So this is a little bonus discussion, I guess, for the Patreon. Some of you have asked me to discuss some of the older albums, how they came about, the writing process, the recording process, this kind of thing. Give a little insight into where we were at that time in life. So I'm not going to do them in order. I'm going to start with Spirit the Earth Aflame, seeing as it's 20 years old this year. I have the CD in front of me here, so I'm going to go through it. And let's see what memories it jogs. Well, first things first is that we'd been on two labels before that with Imrama and Journey's End, Cacophonous and Misanthropy, and we started off our third album on our third label, which looking back looks kind of crazy because you don't normally hop around labels that often, and very much a label who knows you might disappear or leave isn't going to put the best amount of promotion into the album that they get to release, etc. But for whatever reason, we were young and naive, and it just sort of worked out that way. But we'd taken years between Imrama and Journey's End, or at least what seemed like years. In reality, it was 3 or 4, the same as we do now. But it seemed like a long time, 3 years maybe. But we'd made the EP, The Burning Season, in 99, and that had sort of kick-started a new level of energy between us. It kind of, we went into a period of like quite a strong songwriting period, you know. We were maturing, we were getting this sort of epic touch. The songs were coming more easy to us. We'd found our feet more, found our style, found what we wanted to say a little bit easier. First things first, Spirit the Earth Aflame, the original version looks terrible. It was not what we intended. It was Hammerheart Records in Holland. At the time, it was really going places, but the aesthetics of those old CDs, it was clear that we put our faith in somebody in the art department there who didn't really know what they were doing. The Ouroboros is pretty cool. It was done by Simon, who played the bass for Destroyer 666 way back then. He used to live in my house in Dublin. It was just a doodle he did, and I wanted it to look like the cover of a leather-bound book. But of course it didn't quite look exactly like that on the CD booklet that I'm looking at. It's amateurish enough, but it was 2000. We weren't still not exactly sure of all of the aesthetics we were going for. We knew what we were reaching for, but we're still young and a little bit naive in what we could ask for, However, there was a huge step up in the sound on this album. It's a big sounding record. We'd gone to Academy Studios in Yorkshire, to Mags, to mix Imrama and then to record Journey's End there. And Mags is a very interesting and influential character in the development of Primordial, and I imagine many bands of that ilk who are he was like a sort of a man with wisdom beyond his years, an incredibly gregarious, influential, just a really good person who was very influential over our way of looking at music, about instilling calm within us, of sort of tempering our more energetic and crazy off the cuff ideas, about trying to make us see the bigger picture. He really had a big hand in those early Primordial records, sort of tempering our desire for youthful exuberance, And so the album was recorded in a studio called Sun Studios in Dublin, which was a really cool kind of basement feeling to it. Old analog studio. We were still recording with machine reel back then. Now a 2-inch reel goes for something like 1,200 or 1,500 euro each reel. So we would have needed a reel for every song because the songs are too long. You couldn't fit 2 on a 12-minute reel. So, as I remember, the first song that we wrote for the record was indeed Gods to the Godless. I think I'd stolen the song title from the back of an old Samael t-shirt or something, and they'd stolen it, I think, from Aleister Crowley or something. And I think the lyrical tone was quite influenced by what I'd seen in the Balkan wars during the early 90s, as in we were supposedly in a time of prosperity in Europe with this kind of emergent middle class, and yet there on the doorstep of Europe was this incredibly tyrannical, bloody confrontation between two religious sides who'd lived in relative peace, you know. And the idea really was just about enforcing tragedy historically as just the norm. Some nations just seem to go through endless tragedies, and that was kind of what I was playing on, you know. I mean, we recorded it mostly live. I don't remember ever using a click track on any Primordial records, you know. The tones are pretty clean. You know, we weren't getting into distorted bass and stuff yet. And I think it has a very rich sort of sonorous feel to the record, you know. Vocally, I mean, things I wouldn't do now, but I think I was finding my feet, finding my range, you know. There's some really deft songwriting touches, I think, especially on Soul Must Sleep, for example. This became a really kind of like favorite song of ours. I'm one we're planning to bring back to the live setting. It became kind of synonymous for all our Dutch friends when a very beloved friend of theirs died in a car crash, and this song was played at her funeral, and so it took on this very serious and righteous meaning within that scene. And we had that was the scene where we had some of our first ever real close friends, 98, 99, 2000, when we used to go and visit Hammerheart and go to the same parties. And oddly enough, yeah, it was like Holland and Belgium were the first places we really played in 98 to 2000. Not really Germany quite as yet. And so we still do have a lot of very old Dutchies, old Dutch friends. And so this song's ended up becoming something quite meaningful for them, you know. I mean, part of it's inspired by Jean-Paul Sartre, by Nausea. You know, you get the quote in the beginning, I've had women, I've fought with men, I can never turn back any more than a record can spin in reverse. I was going through some sort of, I guess, early 20 something existential know-it-all phase where, you know, kind of slightly world weary from my young years, and but I still like the lyrics, the tone, the feeling, you know. And I still think it's one of the best songs that we've written. Actually, it would be definitely somewhere in around a top 20 if we had of all the band songs, and we have quite a lot of songs by now, you know. Burning Season appeared on the EP before of the same name. It's a bit more of a blunt, simple kind of riff. We actually recorded a D-beat version of it kind of in rehearsal, just kind of jokingly once, which sounded fucking great. I wish we could release that, you know. Bring the women, children before me. Sounds pretty cool, actually. Maybe we can have like an alternate D-beat version of loads of the songs. The lyrics were just like a kind of I'd written a couple of years before. In fact, the lyrics I think go back to 1994, 95. They're kind of Lovecraftian dreams of shores of bone and oceans of blood, you know, lapping against them, and some sort of ghoulish characters, you know. I mean, the intent was to write some really brutal lyrics, you know, bring the women and children before me. Again, I think I was trying to move away from some of the Celtic, more shamanistic, almost religious tones on some of the albums before, or spiritual tones, and write these kind of like rather nasty kind of almost militaristic lyrics, kind of like rejoicing in cruelty, you know. I guess this was the black metal idiom of the time, you know. Glorious Dawn is an interesting song. It was an attempt, I think, to make something a little bit more brutal. The opening riff reminds me a bit of like Samael or Rotting Christ or something a little bit. It's more of an old early 90s black metal song, with again death metal vocals, which are something I never really did very much. It was never really my thing, brutal vocals, but I think they're pretty good here. I kind of like them, you know. The song itself is missing something. To go back and play it now, the opening part is great, and then it kind of, once it hits the blast beat, it kind of sort of seems to meander off and tail off. The last riff is cool. We always had terrible problems trying to record the blast beat because we weren't using a trigger and we weren't using a click, and I always thought the blast should be da 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 da, led by the snare. Kieran thought it was led by the bass drum, which is like, if you think of the difference of I don't know, Satyricon or Beherit, drawing down the moon, this tug 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 bass drum. So we argued about that a lot, but it's still not a bad song. I still quite like it. It's missing something. I like the lead at the end. I think is really great movement. Cruel Sea was something Kieran did, just an instrumental. Still pretty cool, pretty nice, pretty visual, and it always has a nice flourish to the album to have a couple of odd songs, like the intro, the Spirit the Earth Aflame intro, which starts with the same drum beat, which echoes the drum beat at the end of Journey's End, this Ashtar Dernock song. It's a kind of callback, to the intro, outro, the back-to-back thing, if anybody ever noticed that. Children of the Harvest is one of the few songs I ever wrote about which Irish mythology, specifically about Celtic mythology, in the sense of referencing the children of Lear, which was a mythological tale of three siblings turned to swans who had to endure 300 years in a row, 900 years of isolation on 3 different lakes before they were allowed to turn home, and then they came home to find their kingdom. Their parents were long since dead, and their kingdom had changed and been ruined beyond repair. And I sort of used it as a metaphor for hundreds of years of migration of Irish people, and how it must feel to return back, having migrated through generations. And it's a sort of song about how Irish people moved and populated the world, and the sort of, I guess in South America or Portuguese you call it saudade, which is like a sort of soul sadness. I guess there's a kind of an equivalent of that in Irish people, but a bit full of rage, and whiskey, and the kind of thoughts of the old country. So that's kind of I wanted to put that. I think it's a great song, and the intro is great. The kind of verses and choruses are pretty cool, and the ending is very epic. But somehow it misses maybe a little break in the middle of it. I kind of wish I'd done the vocals maybe a bit more powerful, a bit more layered, have a few whatever, a few harmonies in it, a little bit more complicated, because we were starting to play with doing vocal harmonies, and I was trying to begin to understand the different tonalities between the voice, and you get the death metal in Glorious Dawn, and Children of Harvest is a bit more relaxed tone. Soul Must Sleep is a very laid back tone. I mean, when I sing Gods to Godless now, I sing it much more aggressively than on the record. But, that's kind of to be expected. Gods to Godless became like a signature song, and it's still one of my very favourite songs that we did, To Enter Pagan isn't live, obviously, but we stole the crowd from some power metal live record that I was listening to. Might have been Stradivarius or something. I don't remember. We stole it anyway. Mags heard it and went, we need a crowd, because the "We Have Returned" thing is that is real. That's from a gig in Cork, and then we just put. So "To Enter Pagan" was the first song on our demo from '93, and initially we didn't want it on the record, but Hammerheart kind of said, this is kind of like a little bit of an anthem. It's got to be on there. I mean, realistically, it shouldn't be down as a bonus song. It should be on the record, but we were being cantankerous and young and sticking to our guns, and no, that's not going on the record. It doesn't fit. And of course, it kind of does fit. It's a simple song that's kind of written with, I guess, Bathory, Bloodfire, Deathy kind of vibes in mind, and here it's kind of opened out and a bit bigger. But yeah, it's a cool kind of pagan black metal song. I guess we started to put it together at the end of '92, So on the CD here now, it has the bonus tracks Among the Lazari and Let the Sun Set in Life Forever, which are from the Burning Season EP. They all have very similar sounds because they recorded in the same studio. I'm pretty sure even with the same drums and same amps and stuff. And the Burning Season is one of the best sounds actually we ever had on a record. I mean, those 4 songs, Let Sunset and Life Forever, sounds great. It's a reworked version of the song from Imbrama with an extended intro, like we would play now, taking a long time to move through the riffs, sound kind of like I've been singing, actually. My voice is a bit done in. Just got cold in Dublin all of a sudden. So yeah, Among the Lazari is more of a kind of old school black metal song. Lyrics written in 91, 92, sort of anti-Christian, anti-religious stuff. The Lazari were like Lazarus among the... It's kind of like some sort of me trying to be blasphemous, saying, if you're not among those risen against, into this other form of arcane spirituality that black metal represented, then, you're not sort of worthy of, I don't know, probably living, I imagine. And also it has this, intuited silence where once my tomb, kind of very overdramatic voice, which I'll hear now and I think to myself, the impetuosity of youth, trying to do your best, sort of 1950s Pathé newsreel voice, or whatever it was. It's part vampire, part Pathé News, But overall, to me, it's a better album than the one that came after, Storm Before Calm, which was beset by lots of other problems, which I'll talk about again. But it's a big, rich, epic kind of record. And for me, it's very important because it announced to the scene, to the world, I guess, here's a band you got to take seriously. Here's a band now that has a canon of music that's to be respected. It was epic. It was a bit nasty here and there in places, but it had this rich, sonorous, Irish, tragic, melancholic tone. And it's hard to believe it's 20 years ago, but yeah, it is 20 years ago. The reissues look so much nicer than the original CDs, but I can't fault the master and the mix. It was really done very well, and it was done in a simple way that maybe we could have done with something of those nature with Gathering Wilderness or that kind of stuff, but it's a consistent record. It's and it does stand in my top couple of records that we made. That's really it. 20 years. I'd like to add a few odd songs from it into this set list that's theoretically going to come if we ever manage to get there. But yeah, so that's it. That's just a little bonus chat about an album for all the Patreons. Hope you enjoy it. Keep throwing at me ideas you want me to talk about. I'll put stuff up there, no problem. I'm still feeling my way around the concept of what it means morally or whatever. And when maybe morally is not correct. I think if people get something they feel is rewarding from the page, then it's nobody else's business, so to speak. There you go. A little look at Spirit the Earth Aflame. Next time.